You know what needs to be done. The assignment, the workout, the phone call, the email you've been avoiding for 3 days. You know exactly what needs to happen. You even want to do it, and yet somehow you don't. Instead, you watch videos, you scroll, you reorganize your desk, you stare at the task, think about the task, worry about the task, and then never actually start the task. Which raises a strange question. If your brain wants to do something, why doesn't your body listen? Because the truth is that most people are fighting the wrong enemy. This is not usually a knowledge problem, it's not usually an intelligence problem, and surprisingly often, it's not even a motivation problem. The real problem is that your brain is not a single system. It is a collection of systems, and sometimes those systems want completely different things. Most people imagine decision making as a simple process. You decide, then you act. But real human behavior is messier than that, because one part of your brain can make a decision while another part is responsible for actually carrying it out. Think about how often you've said, "I'm starting tomorrow." You weren't lying. At that moment, you genuinely meant it. The decision was real, the intention was real, the problem appeared later, when tomorrow arrived, because the version of you that plans your future and the version of you that exists in the present moment often have different priorities. Future you wants long-term rewards. Present you wants immediate comfort. Future you wants the six-pack. Present you wants the couch. Future you wants the finished project. Present you wants one more episode. And when those two versions collide, present you usually wins. Not because you're weak, because immediate rewards are incredibly powerful. Your brain evolved in environments where immediate opportunities often mattered more than distant goals. Food now, safety now, comfort now, not 6 months from now, now. And that ancient wiring still influences behavior today. This is where people get frustrated, because they assume knowledge should automatically create action. If I know exercise is good for me, why don't I exercise? If I know I should study, why don't I study? If I know scrolling is wasting time, why am I still scrolling? The answer is simple. Knowledge and action are not the same thing. Every year, millions of people learn exactly how to improve their lives and then change nothing. Not because they don't understand, because understanding isn't what creates behavior. Emotion does. Your brain doesn't ask what is the best choice, it often asks what feels easiest right now. And those are very different questions, which is why people can spend hours researching productivity while avoiding the thing they were supposed to be productive about. The research feels useful, the task feels uncomfortable, so the brain chooses the path with less resistance. Most of the time, the problem isn't laziness, it's avoidance. And avoidance is far more powerful than most people realize. Imagine you need to send an important email. It takes 5 minutes. Objectively, it isn't difficult at all. But maybe you're worried about the response. Maybe you're afraid of looking stupid. Maybe you're worried it won't go well. Suddenly, the email isn't just an email anymore, it's discomfort. And your brain starts looking for escape routes. You check your phone, get a snack, clean your room, watch one video, then another, then another. Not because those things matter, because they temporarily remove the uncomfortable feeling. The relief feels good. So your brain learned something dangerous. Avoidance works, at least in the short term. The problem is that every time you avoid the task becomes bigger, and the bigger it becomes, the harder it feels to start. Researchers and therapists often describe this as an emotional barrier rather than a productivity problem. The task itself isn't always what's stopping you, it's the emotions attached to it. For some people, the problem goes even deeper. They don't just procrastinate, they freeze. They sit down, look at what needs to be done, and then nothing happens. People often describe this as feeling stuck. like pressing the gas pedal while the car remains parked. This experience is especially common in people with ADHD and executive function difficulties. Tasks can become so overwhelming that the brain essentially locks up instead of choosing a direction. The strange part is that they usually care a lot. They know the deadline, they know the consequences, they know what needs to happen, which makes the situation even more frustrating, because from the outside, it looks like they don't care, but internally, they're often fighting a battle nobody else can see. Here's another strange thing your brain does. It rarely sees tasks accurately. It sees stories. Write the essay. Sounds simple, right? But your brain expands it into research, planning, editing, formatting, submitting, getting graded, possibly failing, disappointing people, looking stupid. Suddenly one task becomes 50. And the brain responds the same way people respond to large threats: avoidance. This is why breaking tasks into ridiculously small pieces works, not because it's a productivity hack, because you're reducing the amount of threat your brain perceives. Don't write the essay, open the document. Don't clean the room, pick up one shirt. Don't start the business, write one sentence. The smaller the first step becomes, the harder it is for your brain to justify avoiding it. Most people think action creates motivation, but it's often the reverse. Motivation is usually the reward for movement, not the cause of it. Think about the last time you finished a workout. You probably felt more motivated afterward than before. The same thing happens with studying, cleaning, writing, basically almost everything. The hardest part is rarely doing the thing, the hardest part is starting. Because once movement begins, your brain receives new information. Progress is happening, the threat decreases, momentum appears. And momentum is one of the most powerful forces in human behavior. An object at rest stays at rest. An object in motion stays in motion. Turns out that idea applies surprisingly well to people too. So why won't your body listen to your brain? Because your brain isn't one voice, it's many voices. The part that wants a better future, the part that wants comfort, the part that's afraid, the part that's overwhelmed, the part that's trying to protect you from failure. And every day, those voices compete for control. The people who seem disciplined aren't necessarily winning because they're stronger. They're often winning because they've learned something important. They don't wait until they feel ready. They don't wait until motivation arrives. They don't wait until everything feels perfect. They start anyways. And once they move, the rest of the brain slowly follows. Because the distance between knowing what to do and actually doing it is where most lives are built.